everyone, in today's video we're going to be checking out the new Samyang 50mm f1.4 Mark II lens for photo and video. So for photo we're going to be testing it out on the Sony A7IV, and I also have my A7III which we'll be using a little bit as well. And for video we're going to be testing it out on the A7S III. So let's get started with some autofocus tests. For today's review we are going to head straight to our photo shoot. I did do some IAF tests on a different day, but there is a huge but with this lens that I need to get out of the way before sharing any more thoughts of this 50mm f1.4 Mark II. I was really excited to hear about this lens and it felt fine to shoot with on the day. However, the problem started when I was culling my images after the shoot. I'm disappointed that the focus accuracy was just not what I expected, which I do have some ideas as to why this could be, which I'll get into in a minute. I've had a lot of good experiences with Samyang/Rokinon lenses in the past, and I have a few of these videos up on my channel if you want to watch. I'm not sure if this lens might be a bad copy, but throughout my photo shoot with it, it had very inconsistent focus accuracy. On the worst side of the scale, there were sections of photos where I only had one in focus out of the bunch, such as in these shots here where she's leaning on the chair. The IAF was on Chloe's eyes the whole time, but the majority of photos were focused on her eyelashes or eyebrows, and I only have this one photo that's in focus on her iris. There was also a section of photos that had critical focus on her knee and her face was slightly out, even though again, the focus point did not indicate this while shooting. I think when you were facing this way, actually you had more sun on your face, so I might twist the chair. And you can twist your shoulders to face me a little bit more too. Yeah, perfect. That looks so good. So these were two scenarios where the autofocus was performing at its worst compared to the rest of the day. For the rest of the shoot session, the focus was better than those two scenarios, but I would still say that it's hit and miss. I was shooting wide open at f1.4 the entire time, since that is usually the hardest place for a lens to focus, and I want to see how well it will perform. So the main takeaway that I have from this lens is that it is inconsistent with focus accuracy. There were a couple of spots where I only had 1 in 10 photos in focus. Then there were better sections where 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 were in focus, with the out of focus images focusing on her eyelashes, eyebrows, cheekbones, or hair instead of her iris. Here's another example of consecutive photos I took in real time. This is what the majority of my shoot looks like on this lens. Some good photos to choose from, but also a handful of photos with focus on the eyebrows or somewhere else in the frame. I did check the calibration of this lens, and out of the factory it was calibrated to -1. I tried it at all the settings with a calibration chart after the shoot, and there was an insignificant difference between all of them. So I'm fairly certain the misfocusing of this lens is not due to calibration. So why do I think this lens is performing like this? Well, as you know, I've used Samyang lenses in the past. For example, I absolutely loved the Samyang 85mm f1.4 AF lens. It's a gorgeous lens with great autofocus performance. I shot a lot of movement with that lens at our portrait photo shoot and had no issues getting photos tack sharp on the model's eye. The Samyang 35 and 85 1.4 AF both use dual linear sonic motors, which helps them focus fast and more accurately. On the other hand, this Samyang 50 Mark II uses a linear stepping motor like the 50 Mark I. My current opinion is that this motor just isn't fast enough to keep up with my pace of shooting at f1.4. We'll see more examples of this later in the video, but in video mode on the A7S III, you can see that the transition speed is quite slow on this 50, and this is on the fastest transition speed of 7 on the A7S III. So maybe if you don't shoot wide open often, or your photo shoot pace is a bit slower than this, or you have the time to take your time with shooting, then maybe this lens will be more suitable, but overall, I have to say I'm disappointed with the autofocus accuracy of this 50mm f1.4 Mark II. I wish Samyang had kept going in the direction of their 35 or 85 f1.4. I would have loved to see a 50 Mark II that performs in the same way as these two lenses. I also ended up filming a comparison video between the 50 f1.4 Mark I versus Mark II. I noticed both lenses had focusing issues on the day. The Mark II is better at getting more in focus photos, but it's still not at the same level as the Samyang 85 or 35 f1.4. Let me know in the comments if you still want to see that comparison video and I can put it together for you. When I did get a photo in focus, I do like the sharpness from this lens. You can see a nice amount of skin texture, especially around Chloe's cheekbones. It looks really nice. I've always said this, that I really like the character of Samyang lenses, including this one. I think they're really flattering for portraits and skin. This lens is lightweight. It's 165 grams lighter than the original 50 Mark I. This Mark II weighs 420 grams, and I also like the new material they've made this lens out of. You can no longer see all your fingerprints on the lens when you touch it like the original 50.
That looked really nice with your chin if you bring it into your shoulder a bit more. Yeah.
I like the background to foreground separation of this lens, and with the right background, the bokeh is very round and defined. You can see chromatic aberration around the bokeh in some photos too. Speaking of CA, there is a fair amount of chromatic aberration in the images I got. You can see it around her arms, in the bokeh, on the camera. So here's a collection of some of those photos so you can take a closer look. I usually don't mind a bit of CA in my shots as you can easily remove it in Lightroom, but when it happens a lot and you get different colors like purple and blue fringing, it starts to add extra time into your editing, which I like to avoid as much as possible.
Beautiful. I love that with your hands if you bring it a little closer to your face.
It was an extremely overcast day on our shoot, so here's some photos I took another day of the lens flare. As usual, Samyang has a really nice lens flare. At some angles, it blends in really nicely to the photo where you can use it to add a special touch to your images. At other angles, the orange part of the lens flare becomes a little more defined, but I do like that it's off to the side of the frame.
For this one, I kind of want to shoot like a little bit of the edge of the street too. So if you wanted to stand, yeah, just there, maybe a little bit more out. Okay.
Whoa.
It's so loud. It's aggressive. That looks really cool.
Finally, for photo, I switched to the Sony A7 III now, as I also wanted to show you some examples of photos from this camera body as well. There I was a second ago commenting at how loud the shutter sounds compared to the A7 IV. It was echoing down the street.
I feel like my camera's echoing like down the street. It's so loud.
I unfortunately had the same focus accuracy issues on the A7 III as I did on the A7 IV. Even though IAF performance looked strong and was sticky on Chloe, there were still misfocused photos on her eyelashes, eyebrows, and nose. I won't dwell on that too much anymore though. For this section here, I'll only show you the photos that I did get in focus. I think this lens produces nice photos on the A7 III as well. I like the color rendition of these photos, and the sharpness is pretty nice too. It's sharp enough to see details without a clinical look. You can still see some chromatic aberration in the bokeh and the same CA we could see around her shirt and the sleeves of her shirt as the A7 IV.
Get a close up here as well. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Last but not least, let's take a look at some video tests on the Sony A7S III. As we saw a little earlier, I think the transition speed is quite slow when the lens needs to jump focus in the frame, which again could be an explanation as to why it has a hard time focusing a moving subject at f1.4 in stills mode. You can see the performance of the lens is lacking in speed. In video, you can also see it being quite slow when I'm moving towards and away from the camera. Dan also captured some 4K slow-mo shots of Chloe at our shoot so we can take a closer look. My final thoughts are that overall this lens is a miss from me. To be completely honest with you, I was really excited about this lens at first, but after using it out of the box at a portrait photo shoot, I can't say that this is a lens I would rely on even for the price point it's at. I don't think this 50mm f1.4 Mark II is a big enough improvement from the Mark I version. Again, I really wish they made this lens like they did the 85 and 35 f1.4. Both those Samyang lenses are great and focus without an issue. I would also love to hear if you end up getting or trying out this lens, if you end up having a different experience than me as well.
So that is all I have for today's review of the Samyang 50mm f1.4 Mark II lens. Let me know what you thought of the photos, of the lens, and of the review down in the comments below. But as always, thank you so much for watching. I make new videos every single week, so I'll see you all next time. Bye.